Hey, so today I'm going to be talking about the things I've learned about teaching Pilates as a result of the pandemic. So, going pretty close on a year now of teaching on the internet exclusively, like everyone else, excluding New Zealand. But I've had a lot of thoughts over the past year about what this has opened up to me about just the practice of teaching in general, what it's made me realize about Pilates as an industry, and also what I think about things like teacher training for the future going forward. So the first thing is I'm not talking about like tools for how to teach online. That's not what this is about. But just kind of the overall lessons. And I wrote down 3 for today. So the first thing that comes to mind is the need for our teacher training programs and our professional associations to really prepare us for the whole scope of issues that we are going to be facing as full-time or part-time teachers. This I think has never been clearer before when we had issues like, what do we need to know for our insurances? How do our insurances change when you're teaching online? What do I need to change in my terms and conditions? Am I playing music? Do I need to have music rights? That suddenly became a much bigger issue when you have technology platforms involved that might come after you, not them, but music companies might come after you for copyright. What do I need to know about marketing? How do I need to get the word out there? Because I can't necessarily just rely on word of mouth. So for me personally, the issue that hit home the closest for me was the challenge of how do we even talk about what Pilates is. So prior to COVID-19, I was really planning on having just a very simple brick and mortar Pilates studio, really focusing on word of mouth referrals and that being kind of the way that I grew my business. I knew that there was a subtlety to how I like to teach, and that was something that was best experienced and not something that I had found the language within the Pilates community to talk about. And I really didn't want to spend all of the time and the energy working with a copywriter and brand specialist to do it on my own. Also for context, my partner this is what he does for a living. He used to be a copywriter. He is a brand content strategist. So it was like on the one hand available, but even then it was just not what I was interested in doing and seemed like a ton of work. So that was one thing that I noticed very clearly, was that we need to do more going forward in both our teacher training programs as well as our professional associations. That includes things like the PMA, but also locally. I don't reside in the United States, so I also have a national Pilates association. And making sure that people who are teaching full-time, part-time, contract basis, whatever, have all of the skills that they need to have and all of the resources available to them, not financial, but like the know-how resources to get help when a crisis does arise, because that's inevitable, because this is a real job. Like, it's fun, but it's a real job. The other thing that's also been very clear and is kind of like a segue from that is the issues surrounding everyone's favorite topic, pricing. So it's been a really interesting year for pricing for me. So I live in a very expensive country, which means that I have expensive bills to pay because of where I live. And what I noticed in the first lockdown, so about April 2020, was that there was a lot of people like going online for free, and offering, Instagram live classes and all of that. And then in about May, people are like, wait, no, I can't do that. Like, I've got bills to pay. And myself, I struggle a lot with things like my membership of, what was it that I needed to be, how could I price fairly? I definitely made mistakes of giving away too much, and kind of falling for that. It's It's a whole other thing, neoliberalism thing of you're just going to give away everything and people will come to you. It's not always how it works. And when you're a small business, you can't afford to just give all your stuff and all of your time away. It's just not realistic. But the issue of pricing and really needing to be firm on what you need to have a sustainable living wage for where it is that you live. One thing that I think is really challenging in the Pilates industry is increasingly, at least where I live, I've seen a lot of people do this kind of as a hobby job, which I find very dangerous for those of us who do it full time, specifically because people who do it with a hobby have a very different financial motivation than those of us who do this as an actual career. And what tends to happen, or what I've noticed, is that people are like, oh, I just do it for fun. I don't really need to think about it for the money. And then the pricing generally comes from like, I'll just look at what someone else does. You know, I'm not thinking about it too much. And it's a couple, you know, it's some money in my bank account at the end of the month. That's nice to have. The thing is, though, is that when I talk to teachers who do this as their full-time career, or they know that their part-time income is essential to their financial planning, we know you can't just like pick a number out of the air. You have to make sure that you're actually making a living wage. And so with that, I think it's become increasingly vital that we have those conversations with ourselves, with our families, our partners, our friends, with your accountants. It's a good resource about what is it that you actually need to be charging hourly in order to make this worth your while. There's all these other issues with pricing as well about, you know, now that everyone's teaching online, is someone going to go to someone in another country that's cheaper and this and that? That's a whole other thing. But it became really, really clear that you need to be really solid on your pricing, and you don't need to feel like you need to undercut yourself because other people cost less. At the end of the day, you still have bills, and if we collectively as a Pilates community realize, hey, none of us are making enough money, we can address that together through various different initiatives and things like that. Again, that's a whole other topic, but it doesn't mean that we need to undercut our pricing. And I think now it's become very clear, especially with so many people spending time, you know, uploading classes online that they've done on Zoom, or maybe they're managing a membership, things that they'd never done before, to be really, really clear of like, hey, how much time does this actually take? I've done another video on this. And then how much do I actually need to be earning to live and to make this worth my while? So that's another thing that's been really clear through the pandemic, of the need for all of us in the Pilates community to be firmer on pricing, to be more confident with our pricing. And if we see a problem, we all as an industry can support each other to do something about that. And if you're like, what does she mean? It means things like professionalizing so that we get more insurance coverage, as an example, or changing how it is that we interact with the community so that they see us valuable, and not just as like a disposable one-off. Again, that's kind of a whole other bucket of worms. The last thing about teaching Pilates during the pandemic and what I've learned, and this I think is really exciting, is that it's given this opportunity for us to really focus on finding your teacher identity. So I think right now there's a lot of conversations people are having and kind of reflecting on their teacher training experience. And my take is that as long as you're not hurting anyone, there's no such thing as like bad Pilates teaching. There's different ways of going about it. You might be someone who like loves a really sweaty, tough, hard class. And you might be someone who loves really finite, smooth, gentle, slow movement, and that's your teaching style. That's great. The thing is, it's not about like being like, this is better than the other. It's finding what is it that your voice is as a teacher, and what is it that you really want to focus on. Because again, that's not something we're really taught in many of our teacher training programs. It's kind of like, here's the exercises. Maybe there's some indication you should teach in the style of that specific school, but now like we know, I think there's a certain beauty in the fact right now that none of us have the ability, or most of us don't have the ability to teach with our hands. We can't rely on some of those like easier things of being like, no, the shoulder, I mean that anymore. It means you have to explore what is your voice actually, what is it that you enjoy doing in your teaching, and how is it that you enjoy communicating that. That alone, I think, has the potential to really encourage a lot of development for the Pilates industry at large, because it's something we've never really talked about. Not really, at least I haven't seen a lot of it. There's conversations, a little bit, but never really to be like, hey, you know what? Sometimes I don't want to sit there and talk to someone about their shoulder blade for like 5 minutes and then have them move. Sometimes I'm like, I'm going to let that go. And I kind of like that. That kind of works for me. And you know what? The people who come to my class, they seem to like that better too. That's totally valid. And maybe you're someone who's like, wow, this is really cool. I've done a ton of workshops. I've learned a ton about anatomy. I really am liking just like geeking out with people's bodies. And maybe we do like, I don't know, 10 exercises in the entire class, but I love it. That's awesome. Lean into that. Focus on that. And what I think is going to happen if we ever get out of this is that we're all going to be able to sit down and be like, okay, what are the different styles of teaching? Just like with things like therapy, I've also spoken this in a different video, like massage, doesn't mean that one kind of therapy is better than the other. It's about making it clear to our customers, our clients, how it is that we work, so then they can come to us and say, I know I like this kind of style. Or if they go somewhere else, they can also say, okay, this style is what I've done in the past, just to give you kind of a ground basis of their understanding. So those are the 3 things that I've learned about Pilates teaching, thanks to the pandemic. The need for a strong teacher training program and professional association that really addresses the full scope of everything it is that we need to know as Pilates teachers, which is so much more than just the exercises. That we need to all really be focused on pricing and making sure that we are supporting ourselves and also supporting our peers within the industry by encouraging them to have fair pricing for wherever it is that they live. And if we notice a problem, we can collectively do something about that. And then the last thing is really taking this as an opportunity to figure out what your teaching identity is, and just to focus on that so that we're all prepared when things do reopen, and we can meet each other and sprawl all our markers and whiteboards and everything out in a room together. How novel. We can have some cool conversations about like, okay, so what's the future gonna look like? So, love to hear from you. I hope you're staying safe, staying well, and I'll see you around.